For as long as I can remember, I've been afraid of being watched by people in the woods or through the windows. Movies like this stranger scared the shit out of me. One night, we were invited to a backyard fire at our good friend's home. He lives on one of the main drags in our city, and the house sits directly to the left of one of the city's main walking trails. They have a high fence along the side of the backyard, adjacent to the trail, but at the rear of the garden, the fence is a waist-high chain link with a gate. Lucky for our friend Shane, his house also sits on a green bank. The property is very private with large trees and bushes just outside the back fence. In order to access the gate and the fence in the rear from the outside, you have to make your way through low shrubs and trees. It's nice. We feel safe there. Not that we live in a really bad area, but generally we feel safe. A crowd of us were standing around the fire pit having a few brews and smoking a few tokes. All the guys grew up together, so we were reminiscing about our childhoods. The story of the Dickie Tag came up. Now, Dickie Tag is probably exactly what you think it is, but then again, maybe not. Young kids running around with their little birds out, either tagging each other with their dickies or tagging each other's flailing wieners. The rules are still unclear. We had a solid buzz going, and we were roaring with laughter and crying from the belly laughs. It was a hilarious discussion debating who actually played this perverted game. So, there we all were, yelling about Dickie Tag with Kendrick Lamar on the bus, having a great time when one of the girls, Mel, is trying to get the group's attention. This goes on for about 45 seconds to a minute before anyone pays any heed. When we finally shut up and can hear her, she points to the back fence near the gate and says, "There's a person standing there." We all turn and look, and lo and behold, there's an effing dude standing in the dark jiggling the fence. We shut off the tunes, and Shane and Mitch walk towards him and ask, "What's on the go, man?" My initial thought was maybe we were being too loud yelling about dicks. It is a family neighborhood after all. The stranger in the dark responds with, "I'm a little lost." This is where the creepiness really starts. Shane responds, asking him how he could be lost. The path is 20 feet in the other direction. The stranger tells us he is a 10-year-old Army combat veteran and begins to walk away, and stops after 5 feet and looks back. Shane then yells at him, "What are you doing, dude? You're watching us in the woods being a creep. Get out of here." The man walks a few more feet and turns and stares again. For a second time, Shane tells him to get away from the backyard. The stranger makes his way back to the path and looks again. Shane and Mitch at this point both tell him to stop staring and get out of there. They all but shush him down the path. So at this point, we're all pretty creeped out. We have no idea how long this guy was standing there before Mel noticed him. The entire back of the house is woods, so we didn't know if the guy actually went on his way, or if he looped back and was creeping in the woods. The crowd are all having a discussion about what had transpired and beginning to relax again. My buddy was probably drunk anyways. We are known for drinking where I come from. Not 15 minutes later, along the side of the garden that is adjacent to the trail, I noticed somebody walking down the path. I thought this was odd based on what just happened, as well as the time of night. The person walks along and looks in on us, then stops and approaches the fence. I yell out above the conversation that somebody is by the fence again, so all 6 of the men present walk over. It was the same dude, but he had approached us from the opposite direction we had shooed him in moments before. The guy starts by saying, "I was only joking, you guys." Now at this point, Shane got a solid buzz on and was not impressed this creeper was back. Jana, who is the level-headed one, also goes over to mediate the conversation. She finds out his name and that he is looking for directions to another main road in the city, located about 15 minutes north of where we were. He tells her again he is a 10-year Army combat veteran. Between her and the men, they point the creeper in the right direction and he starts to walk. Still sketched out, the guys watch him and where he goes. Instead of going up the road as instructed, they watch him try and enter the private backyard of the house across the street. He gets yelled at again by Shane to go up the road and not on someone's private property. There are a few choice words said. Buddy is in the middle of the busy road and almost gets struck by a truck, but he finally makes his way up the road, and we watch until he's finally out of sight. Now, we are sufficiently spooked. I mean, chances are this guy was tweaking on drugs or having a mental break, maybe. Either way, he was acting unpredictable. It wasn't sitting well with Mel, so she chose to alert the police, just to let them know a potentially intoxicated man is causing some minor disturbances. The police were exceptionally interested in Mel's call. They wanted to know exactly where we saw this guy, what he was wearing, when we saw him last, etc. 3 cruisers and a ghost car showed up within minutes. Mel and Jana took the bullet and went to talk to the police in person. He got asked a lot of questions and, of course, provided what detail they could. It was at this point Mel noticed the police dog, so she asked if we should be worried. Is this guy a threat? He was told, no, you should be fine, by the officer, and that they were just trying to find him. We stay in the backyard and watch the police and the dog go down the path with the flashlights. Another officer goes up the road on foot looking for the stranger. Eventually the show dies down and our crowd decided to Google the creeper's name and see if there were any news stories. The first hit is contact info for a person of the same name who lives in the community the guys are from. The exact community we're laughing about talking about. Dicky Tag. Kind of creepy. Totally a coincidence but still spooky. The second hit is a story about a body that was found in the city's largest park about 5 years ago. There was no name in that story, but as we scrolled down to the comments, the creeper's name was there. He had written a comment on this story and all it said was, "Rest in peace, Shane. Peace out." We haven't seen anything in the news about what may have transpired with this guy, but I honestly hope he got the help he needed. This happened in 1978, but I may never recover. If it had happened in the era of stalker awareness, I would have been terrified. I was adopted, which isn't a bad thing, except that my parents had wanted a perfect dream Barbie doll daughter, and I was supposed to live out their script. They were very controlling and coupled with alcohol abuse. By the time I was a teen, the breach was so bad I wasn't living in their house most of the time. I tried to move back and fix things, but it never worked. What finally broke my back was a guy I'll call Rich. Rich called my house one afternoon and asked for a date. I told him I didn't know him, which was true, and that I wasn't allowed to date. Also true. He seemed annoyed because I didn't know who he was. I'm on the student council. I'm head of our junior achievement club. Big deal. So what? I asked how he got my number because it was unlisted, and he said he volunteered in the school office and pulled my number from student records. That should have been my first clue, I guess, but remember, I was only 15. Anyway, I told him no and hung up, thinking this was the end of it. The next day I get home from school and find Mom all excited. She's gotten a call from Mr. Creepo and his mother and was so impressed that she decided I could go out with him. His mom was going to pick us up and bring me home, so it was okay. I told her I didn't even know the guy, but she thought it was so sweet that he had his mother introduce him. We went out for pizza and a movie, and I thought he was a nice enough guy, but I really wasn't interested. However, he decided this one date meant I was his girlfriend now. He was aided and abetted in this by my mother, who thought he was just perfect and just what we always wanted for you. Explaining to her that I wasn't interested in him just brought up a monologue about what a great guy he was, what a good family he comes from, and why I would rather be home reading a book than out having a good time. Telling her I didn't have a good time just didn't compute in her brain for some reason. I never got to see my other friends because he was monopolizing all my time. On weekends, I had to go to his house for dinner and watch TV. First we watched The Love Boat, and then we watched Fantasy Island, and I had to endure his siblings running around the living room, flapping their arms and yelling, "The plane, the plane." I wish I was making that up. On Saturday and Sunday, we played Atari at his house. At least he had good games, I guess. Sunday mornings, without fail, as soon as Rich wakes up, he calls me. I tried telling him I wasn't interested in a relationship and I didn't want to see him anymore. And he started bawling his eyes out. I had to shake his hands off me. While I was walking home, he called Mom in tears to tell her goodbye. And I guess I just didn't love her enough. And the cycle blasted me when I walked in the door for being so mean to this sweet guy. He quickly learned the way to force me out on dates was to ask in front of her because she would roll over any excuse I came up with. He began trying to get rid of my friends by complaining that they don't like me, which was also true, and asked my mom to make sure they weren't invited over when he was there. My friends either didn't like him or were a bad influence on me. He griped about my clothes and makeup. He hated lipstick especially. I told my mom thinking she'd agree how stupid that was, but when I got dressed for school the next day, she blew up. "What are you doing with that makeup on? Rich told you he doesn't like that. You get in there and wash your face." I was flabbergasted, but said no to the both of them and wore whatever I liked. He'd scowl and screw his face up in the ugliest sneers, saying, "I look like a streetwalker. Over lipstick, eyeshadow, and some mascara. A girl your age has no business wearing a bikini. That top is too low cut. Why don't you show some self-respect?" He would say things like that. I wish he'd been really abusive because then my parents would have agreed to get rid of him, but he was an honor student from a good family, not a troublemaker. At school, the teachers liked him, and all of the other kids thought he was a #1 nerd. They didn't bully him because he stomped everyone's behind academically. I don't know why he fixated on me. Maybe because I was just the shyest kid in school. He never hit me or was verbally abusive. I just couldn't peel him off. But Christmas was the worst. He gave me a list. This is what he wants for Christmas. This is what his sister wants for Christmas, and this is what his mother wants. He expected me to buy gifts for his family. I wasn't even planning to get him anything, and he wanted an Atari game. We couldn't afford an Atari system for ourselves, but Mom of course buys it for him. She gets everything on the list and tells me to hush because they're getting me something too. I asked Rich for a gift certificate to the bookstore, but his mom says gift certificates are tacky. They will get me a real gift, so I'm thinking of something cool. He gets me, and I kid you not, a set of ladies' handkerchiefs. I saw them too for $5 at Kmart, and he demanded an Atari game. His sister gets me nothing. His mom buys me a football jersey. I'm not a football fan, by the way. Like the one Rich wears. Mom goes crazy saying how cute it is that we'll match, and be sure to wear it next Friday so they'll see how much I like it. And I quietly throw it away. I blasted my parents for manipulating and interfering and moved out again. They gave Rich my new address and phone number. I moved and changed numbers again and didn't give them the number. He had Mom go to one of my friends and wheedle it out of her. I almost got fired from a job because he wouldn't stop calling me. He waited for me outside the door of my work and followed, begging and crying. He followed another guy I was dating and tried to convince him we were engaged. I called the cops, but they said he wasn't breaking any laws technically, and even lectured for me not being forceful enough. Sometimes he would disappear for a few months, but always turned up again. My roommate came home from work one day to find him mowing the lawn at the duplex we were renting. At this time, the word stalking didn't exist, or I would have been terrified. The harassment ended only when I moved out of town. I went back for a family funeral and found that he had gone to pay respects, and introduced himself to everyone as my boyfriend. I told everyone if they told him where I was living, I'd shoot them first and him second. I never went to my high school reunions because I was afraid of seeing him there. Last year, I had a route that was super deep in the country. I was used to the back roads and the country now at this job by this point. There are some houses I stopped at where the driveway is super steep or some other shit, but for the most part, everybody was always super friendly out there. Country folk, you know? Well, I had a delivery that was down this long gravel street. There were only a few houses on my journey to the house that my delivery was for. Still at this point, I'm totally fine. There are a ton of these types of roads out here. Well, I arrived at my destination. No mailbox, no driveway, no gravel. You could make out a little bit of a path that has been made from cars driving to the house. But I'm serious when I say a little bit. The driveway is maybe 250 yards long with the house at the end of it. I'm only sketched out because I'm in the woods and land is super unpredictable back here, meaning you never know where there's just a drop-off. I'm in a huge box truck, so if one tire were to slip off to the side, the whole thing would go down. So I'm driving literally probably less than a mile an hour, taking my time, being extremely cautious. As I'm making this drive back to the house, I start kind of checking out my surroundings. I pass a really old broken down truck that the ground has started to grow around. Again, super common back here, no big deal. As I get further and further down the driveway, I notice that I've probably passed about 4 satellite dishes, like cable dishes. I start approaching the house. The house from the outside looks like it is a Walter White Season 5 style cabin. It's a shack. I park and kind of just check out my surroundings. After about a minute, I was like, okay, I'm just going to deliver it and leave. I walk up to the front door of this cabin thing, and the front door has a large glass window in it. Not modern. Think really old. Like a cabin that was built in the late 50s with no repairs. As I set this small package down in front of the door, I glance inside the house. The main room, which would be like a living room I'm guessing, is completely empty. The only things that are in this room are 2 foldable metal chairs. Both unfolded. Both are facing a corner of the room, but nothing is in the corner. In the meantime, I'm trying to do my job with my right hand where I keep making very quick glances inside. From what I saw, there was nothing in that house. The kitchen may have had old appliances in it, but I wasn't really paying attention to that part. My 6th sense kicked in, and my brain obviously said, this isn't right, so I turned around and start walking back to my truck. Maybe 30 feet away, I take my hood off my head and take my hat off so I can have a full peripheral view around me. I immediately start looking to see where the closest neighbor's house is. I see a building up the hill just a tiny bit, but it honestly looked like it was on this guy's property. I'm sure this was my head playing major tricks on me, but as I'm walking back to my truck, I just feel a presence. I feel like it's hanging onto my back, getting heavier and heavier with every single step closer to the van I took. I jumped in my van, locked the doors, and I checked the back to make sure no one was in there. Shit. The driveway. I back out of this entire driveway while checking my surroundings everywhere. I make it back onto the road. As I'm driving down the road, maybe 40 feet away from this dude's entrance to the driveway, there's a trash bag in the middle of the street. It's open just a little bit. I slow down and it looks like there's a woman's sweater or something in there. Was that a kill room? Was someone or multiple people held hostage on that property? Something was up. I immediately contacted my buddy and told him about it. He suggested that I go back and snap a few pictures. I agreed. About 5 minutes go by and I make it back to the address and the trash bag is completely gone. I looked everywhere on the street and on the side of the street. Completely gone. But get this. I always thought about how I never knew what I'm delivering or who I'm delivering to. When I first landed this job, I remember thinking how crazy it would be if somebody was holding people hostage in their house, torturing them and ordering their food and house supplies online because they are afraid of leaving the house with the kidnapped people alone. That's all I could think about when dropping off this package. I left that job not even a week later for different reasons, but I did tell my boss. And he assured me that he would contact the local police department and take that house off our normal route schedule. I never heard anything back about it. I'm aware that if the police went out there and found something or people, I would probably immediately be called in to tell them what I saw. So I'm going to assume that they went out to check it out and found nothing. But in the same sense, it makes me wonder about the trash bag immediately disappearing after I left. Did they realize that they messed up and I was going to say something, so they prepared for that? I don't know. I also have no clue what the address was or how to get there by memory to check it out for myself, but I think about that a lot. And every single time I do, I get chills down my spine just because of the thought of the unknown. So my husband and I are walking home from having a beer at the local pub around 6 p.m. In terms of setting the scene, we live in a small New Zealand town, population around 2,000. That's a real mixed bag in terms of residents. Older folk, meth heads, and low-income people, but increasingly commuters from our capital city, have been settling here. We fall into the latter category. It's spring here, so there was still plenty of light and we're just chatting as we walk the 10 minutes or so home. About 3 minutes into the walk, at the first intersection on our walk, I spot a cat sitting on the fence of one of the corner houses on the other side of the street from us. I say meow and it meows back. It then starts stalking a bird, so my husband and I continue watching this house. The cat really, as we walk past. Suddenly, a person with a brown paper bag mask on their head kind of stumbles out of the front door of this house into the yard. Their mannerisms and how they're moving are so strange, but not what I'd associate with being drunk. The house itself seems completely dead, so there's no party on or anything. The person then turns to us and makes eye contact. Well, the eye holes in the mask are staring at us. And they slowly start backing away to the front door and disappear from view into the alcove. We've been slowly walking this whole time, and at this point I have literal goosebumps and an intense sense of dread. And I write it down. It sounds so silly, but there was something so creepy about this person. We're still looking as we walk past the house, and the paper bag face slowly emerges from the alcove, watching us before disappearing from view again. As we walk and get further and further away, we keep turning around to look, and the same thing happens over and over again. Nothing, and then slowly but surely the paper bag face emerges to watch us. This continued until we were at the end of the street, some 350 meters, and rounded the corner out of sight. It still makes my skin crawl thinking about it. My husband laughed and said it was probably some kid getting ready for Halloween or just messing with us, and he's probably right, but I had to keep turning around to watch my back the rest of the walk home, because I was just so creeped out. When I was around 12, my parents left town for a second honeymoon at Niagara Falls. They left my brother, who was 17, in charge of me and my 10-year-old sister. A few days after my parents left, my brother told me that my sister was sleeping over at her friend's house and that he was getting drunk and high at his buddy's place. He told me to not set the house on fire or rip off my testicles and that I'd have the house to myself. A few hours after my brother left, My St. Bernard started barking his head off at the woods by my house. I thought there was just a bear or a wild dog nearby, and my dog wanted to fight it, as he was quite aggressive towards strangers in his territory. I ignored him, but after 30-ish minutes, I got sick of the barking and went downstairs to lock him in my parents' room. But as I went to the living room to grab him, I saw a man looking straight at my dog through the glass door. He was trying to pick the lock open. I freaked out, told him to screw off, and barely managed to get my dog into my room, and called the police and then my parents. The police came by like 25 minutes later and basically told me they picked up a guy trying to break into a parked car, and they wanted me to see if it was the guy who tried to break in, as the idiot didn't even wear a mask for either crime. Sure enough, it was, and he also confessed to being the culprit behind the other burglaries around town, and he also ratted out his meth cooking / selling partners. Hi guys, this happened about a week ago. I work in a school that has just recently installed video cameras at our gates. Originally, you just had to buzz the gates. We would get a call and they would say who they were and why they were trying to come in. Obviously, you guys can imagine that people might lie about coming in, so we recently installed live cameras so we can look at the gate when somebody buzzes in. At about 12 p.m., we had a call from a parent who dropped their child off late, saying she had seen one man on a motorbike with no registration plate wearing a ski mask and somebody in a van following behind, without a registration plate, wearing a similar mask as well, driving around the outside of the school, and she thought she should let us know. This didn't worry us too much at the time just because the school is protected quite well with the security gates. At 1 o'clock, which is about halfway through the lunch break, most of the kids have finished eating and they play out on the field or playground. From certain sides of the school, you can see the kids playing on the field from the gates outside. Teachers don't really supervise the kids on the field because it's a high school and kids don't really need to be supervised at that age. On our monitor, I see this motorcycle drive up the gates and the van park up on the street. The guy on the bike buzzed and said he would like to pick up his child. I go through standard protocol and ask who he is, to which he just replied, James. I then asked the name of this child and he just said, Matthew. Two very common names, of course. I asked for a second name and they said Thompson. Yet again, another very common name because I have no life. I pretty much know the majority of the people's names here, as I deal with class lists a lot, and I have never heard of a Matthew Thompson in the school. I don't even know why I considered asking them these questions when they clearly weren't parents. Our security cameras are quite well hidden. I only know where they are because of our view in the monitor. I'm presuming they couldn't see them either. I asked them to take off their masks, which caused him to frantically look around, look at his friend in the van, and make a let's go gesture. And soon they sped off. Pretty stupid of me, I know, but I had no idea how else to handle the situation at the time. I should have gotten a colleague to call the police while they were still there, but called the police after and we didn't hear anything back. Edit. 1. We've notified other schools in the area. 2. When I got the call from the parent, I told my line manager and she said that there was nothing we could do unless they're causing a scene or are trespassing on school property, though it is something to call the police for. I was told not to. 3. This is not in America. I'm in the UK. A line manager is the person in charge of the specific area I'm in. For me, it's the principal's secretary. I can't speak to the principal directly. It goes through her. 4. My line manager strictly told me to not call the police unless they threaten the school. They are really strict with phones and calls, so I couldn't even use my personal phone to call it, as mobile phones are strictly out of use. I can't lose my job over using my phone. 5. I work in a very strict Christian, very expensive private school. We have barely ever had problems within school, such as violence. Every school experience is different. Consider that. 6. In our school, there are kids from 11 to 18. The ones who play on the field are usually the youngest. We also have a junior school, and the kids from the junior school visit once a week. So I, 33 female, live at a funeral home owned by and run by my dad. I live in the apartment upstairs and do some side work for my dad, but I don't work for the funeral home. Since I live here though, I tend to interact with a lot of people who are here for funeral related things and whatnot. I represent my dad when I'm speaking to someone here, so I'm always nice and helpful. I've had a couple of crazy people I've dealt with, but nothing like this. This was in mid-March, sometime because it wasn't right at the beginning of the whole COVID takeover. I'd gone to pick up some food for my family around 6 p.m. Unless there is a service, the employers are usually gone, and I believe it was a Saturday as well. So I pull into my parking lot, and as I park, a car drives by me going towards the entrance side. It was a dark SUV, and there are so many people who work here who have similar cars that I couldn't see from that far who it was, but I gave a quick wave, thinking it was someone I knew. Bad idea. So the car stops and the guy gets out. Like I said, I'm used to having to help people and tell them where they can drop things or pick stuff up, etc. So this guy gets out and comes towards my car. I roll down my window a little, expecting to just say hello and tell him that no one is here working. He comes right over to my window and starts leaning in and peering into my car, which was a red flag already, obviously. It was very invasive. I'm glad my doors were locked and I only put it down a little. So this dude basically had his head in my car and it creeped me out. But before anything else, his eyes scared the crap out of me. He was very, very pale with bright red hair, and his eyes were literally the craziest and scariest eyes I've ever seen. It was chilling. I don't know if he was on drugs or just crazy, but I'm already uncomfortable at this point. So he starts to talk to me and ask me if I work here. I tell him no, and that no one is working. Please call tomorrow in the morning and you can speak to someone. Thought that would be it, but no, not even close. This man came to bring an application to my father to work for the funeral home. He was apparently in IT or something, but had studied embalming and volunteered for the Red Cross. He was talking a mile a minute, and I was so incredibly uncomfortable. But even more so when he started to tell me about how certain embalming techniques he studied included hanging cadavers by their feet and other insane sick stuff. He had absolutely no experience in embalming though. He cornered me in my car for like 15 minutes and just rambled. I told him several times, please just call tomorrow morning, I really can't help you right now. So now I'm sitting here in my car with this insane man outside my car, and I also had food on my seat. He was looking into my car, so he saw it. You would think he would take the hint. At some point, I texted my husband and said, come outside now. Thankfully, he actually saw my text and came out pretty quick. So he comes up to this guy and he was like, can I help you? The guy starts cornering my husband also. This guy had absolutely no idea what personal space was, and my husband kept backing up and he would move in closer every time. I took an opportunity to grab the food and get out since he was outside. When I got out, he started telling my husband and me, this virus is going around and there are going to be bodies piling up. They're going to need extra help here when there are hundreds of bodies dead. It almost seemed like he was excited at the thought. He had a resume and I told him multiple times to please bring it by again. I didn't even want to touch anything he had, but he forced it into my husband's hands. I went to the stairs and gave my husband a concerned look and motioned for him to come in. This guy made me extremely nervous, and I didn't want my husband out there any longer. But this guy was almost impossible to walk away from. He did not understand that it was done. So eventually we got away from this freak and got inside. I immediately called my dad to explain what happened and warn him of this guy. I told my dad I had never felt more uncomfortable in my life and there was something seriously wrong with this dude. I wanted to warn him that he'd probably be back the next day. Oh, he came back. A couple days later, mid-morning, I'm upstairs in my apartment and there are several employees in the office upstairs. I hear someone ring the doorbell. Once, twice, 3 times. He then proceeded to ring it non-stop for 15 minutes. They assumed it was him and didn't answer. I went out and I was like, what the heck is with the doorbell? They knew it was him apparently because he had called earlier and wanted to talk to my dad, and one of the employees told him we aren't hiring, but he insisted on talking to my dad. So he came by. Then after the doorbell went off for several minutes, the phone started ringing off the hook. Next, he was going around to all the windows and pounding on them relentlessly. I had told him how crazy he was, but I was glad that they could now see what I meant and that I wasn't overreacting. Eventually, my older brother went down with a mask on. Like I said, this was right in the beginning, and people weren't even wearing masks regularly. But this guy had no boundaries. He then cornered my brother the same way and would not let him leave and end the conversation. We were all just thinking, what the heck is wrong with this guy? My dad did not want to talk to him at all, but he wouldn't give up. As any typical 24-year-old, I'm very independent. I have multiple chronic illnesses that disable me though, so my independence looks a little different from what yours might. For example, I use a wheelchair when I'm out and about, or in the house if I've got an active injury and can't walk, like a bad hip dislocation. I recently got a new wheelchair, and there's one particular feature I made sure I had, or more accurately, didn't have, because of a situation that has happened to me a lot and one event that left me fighting for my life. My new chair doesn't have push handles. I've always hated when people lean on my chair, or in public a stranger just grabs my chair by the push handles and starts trying to quote-unquote help me. If I needed to push, I'd have someone with me. As it is, I have a power assist appliance called a smart drive. You can look them up on Google. They're really cool. My smart drive has given me my independence back, as I did used to be relying on others to push me, but now my nifty little fifth wheel does the propelling for me, and I can roll alongside my friends, get up hills, and it generally just means I can leave the house alone. But some people see a wheelchair and assume the helpful stranger position and go in for the push, you know? Not only is this incredibly annoying, but it's also rude to me. How would you feel if you were minding your own business, crossing a road, and someone started pushing on your legs? Or just swung you up on their shoulders and carted you off? Anyways, I digress. This incident happened back in 2019, so pre-COVID times, and I was out and about doing some shopping. My old wheelchair had push handles because I hadn't started off with a smart drive, just my manual chair, but at this point I did have my smart drive, hence me being out by myself. I also have been wearing a mask far longer than the rest of the country, due to severe allergic asthma. My main triggers are industrial or environmental particles, sprays, perfumes, and even cigarette smoke. So picture this. I'm outside, wheeling along on my own, wearing my Vogue mask, window shopping basically, and then I wasn't. I was whizzing forward, my first thought being that I tapped my wristband accidentally and started the smart drive up, but I very quickly realized somebody was pushing me. I tried to hold my push rims, the rim on the outside of the wheel that a wheelchair user pushes to propel their chair, to brake and turn around to tell them, hey, I'm fine, thank you. I don't need a push, and I actually have an electric box that pushes it for me. But this person just didn't care. They started laughing a strange forced laughter, and I became more firm. Seriously, let go, I'm fine. Literally didn't bat an eyelid. Didn't give a crap at all. Just kept pushing me and said loudly, in a patronizing manner, yes, we're going home now. At this point we're going pretty fast and heading in a direction I really didn't want to go towards, on account of it being a very industrial area where I knew the traffic was bad. Buildings are being demolished for the HS2 railway, and lots of people are smoking at bus stops. I still have my mask on, of course, but I start trying to reach out to strangers, shouting for someone to help me, but no one did. Everybody shrunk away, staring wide-eyed at the crazy disabled girl in the chair and her poor care having to rush her home with a variety of excuses. Oop, I've told you we don't grab people. Yes, I know we're getting tired and you're overdue for meds. Let's not ruin anyone else's day. Sorry everyone. She's in a lot of pain and gets hysterical like this all the time. As he rushes me past a long line of bus stops, several smokers with fog beginning to penetrate my mask. Seriously, get the heck off my chair. I need my inhaler. Let me go now. Kept going and turned down a quieter street where there were literally bulldozers and wrecking balls and the air was thick with dust. I'm getting scared and wheezing, and I'm really panicked now as I know we're headed out of town and I have no idea where we're going. Finally, he screws up, stopping my chair, coming round in front of me and ripping my mask off and begins to say, listen, you little shit. But before he could get any further, I surprised him with a very forceful kick in the crotch. He'd counted on me being paralyzed, I guess, and didn't count on two things. One, my legs working enough to defend myself, and two, the power of panic / fight or flight when a person's throat is closing up. As he recoiled from the hard kick to his nuts, I did what I've seen people do in films and brought my hands together and down on his back as hard as I could, which I think winded him as he let out a wheeze almost as loud as my own. He dropped my mask on the floor in his panic, and while he was backing away, I reached around to my rucksack to grab my inhaler. I immediately took 2 puffs while he was cursing and screaming at me, but my ears had blocked up and my vision was going funny. A couple of the builders had seen the commotion and come over the road to see what was happening, and I pointed at the man and wheezed out, help, I don't know him, before I blacked out. When I came back to myself, I was being lifted onto an ambulance gurney with paramedics and a builder around me. The man who had commandeered my chair was gone, and I had a nebulizer and oxygen blasting through a mask over my mouth and nose. I've never been so glad to take a breath. My vision was still swimming, and I felt like I'd been jabbed hard in my throat and couldn't really squeeze any words out. They loaded my chair into the ambulance and went off to the hospital. When the builders came over and I blacked out, one of them saw my inhaler, saw that my lips were blue, and heard my wheezing and immediately called 999, and the guy who'd almost killed me took off. Another builder tried to chase after him, but he didn't catch up and the guy got away. The one who called the ambulance came with me to the hospital, and I've since become good friends with him, Leroy. My family will forever credit him for saving my life that day. The police came to see me while I was still in the hospital. They kept me for a few days because I also have adrenal insufficiency and had gone into an adrenal crisis after the whole ordeal, so I got lots of nebs and IV steroids, and had me report what they called an attempted kidnapping. At the time, I hadn't even thought about what the outcome might have been, but once the police had talked with me, I realized how lucky I was. That man could have done anything to me, and if he'd picked someone who couldn't use their legs, it could have ended very differently. They spoke to the builder who chased him after the kidnapper, but they were never able to catch him or even ID him. In terms of the wonderful Leroy, the police and my asthma nurse commended him on his quick thinking, and I've been bubbling with his family for the past year. Leroy, thank you for saving my life that day. Hi everyone. I'm really writing this out as a way to vent because I'm in a situation where I feel really stuck. Any advice is appreciated, but I'm not sure there's anything that can be said that will actually help. I've just tried about everything. I'm going to start from the beginning though. This is a story 2 years in the making, so I'll try to be as thorough as possible. In 2019, I graduated with my master's degree and moved to a relatively rural area for my PhD. Thinking we'd make an investment, my dad and I purchased a house. The intent was to rent it out once I completed my PhD. The house was only a block away from a dive bar where my dad was able to make some pretty good friends. He introduced me to everybody, and everyone let me know that I would be so happy in my new house because my next door neighbor was the absolute nicest guy you could ever meet. So we met the neighbor, and he did seem nice enough. He suggested that we exchange numbers just in case I ever needed anything, and I thought that was a great idea. What's the worst that could happen, right? A few days later, my dad left to go back to his home in another state, and I was left on my own devices. Literally the day he left, it started. My neighbor texted me while I was away and let me know he left a gift for me on my front porch. In this text exchange, he started using pet names like Sweetie and Cutie. I went home and he left a hand-painted feeding dish for my cats in my mailbox. At this point, I wasn't alarmed. He was just being nice, I thought. The next day, he sent me more texts with pet names, and I took the opportunity to make sure he knew I wasn't interested in anything romantic. He replied back with a rambling text about how all a person ever needs is friends, and he would like to be friends with me. After that, he would send me texts frequently. Everything from inviting me fishing to telling me he left more gifts on my porch. I would often not reply, or I would tell him I'm busy. I didn't want to be rude, but I also had no interest in any sort of relationship with him other than neighborly. One night, I got a text from the manager of the bar down the street, letting me know that if my neighbor knocked at my door, I probably shouldn't answer. She then told me that my neighbor had walked down to the bar with a hatchet and told the bartender he was hearing voices that got louder as he got closer to the bar. He threatened to kill somebody with the hatchet if the voices didn't stop. They called the police, and the police took the hatchet from him but made no arrest. The manager of the bar picked me up, and I spent the night at her house. She told me that the police said my neighbor was on meth. After that, I tried to keep my distance even more, but things got even weirder. One day, I went out to my car to find a dead squirrel in my driveway. This squirrel had very clearly been run over and moved to right in front of my driver's side door. I just stepped over it, got in my car, and left. When I returned home, the squirrel was gone. Shortly after, I received a text from my neighbor that said, "Someone or something put a dead squirrel in your driveway. Don't worry, I moved it for you." I feel like this was a weird way to word this, and I suspect that he's the one who put the squirrel there. Another time, I walked out of my house to see he had placed an unspent shotgun shell on the bricks in his front yard. He came out and told me that it was to serve as a warning for anyone walking between our houses. For the next couple of months, I did my best to avoid him. He would text me inviting me over, and I would come up with an excuse or just ignore him completely. I wanted to remain cordial since he was my neighbor, but it was getting very annoying and I was uncomfortable. He would text me as soon as I got home, telling me that he was watching me come and go from my house. Around Halloween, he handcrafted a large casket and wrote, "Here lies the last son of a bitch who played mind games." November 2012. all this time still sending me texts. Eventually I got fed up and I stopped responding completely. Less than 2 weeks after I stopped responding completely, he threw a 50-pound flower pot at my front door. You know those big concrete planters? Yeah, one of those. I called the police, who advised me to get a stalking no contact order. A few days later, I was watching TV when a notification popped up that my neighbor was trying to cast a video to my screen. I declined it twice. Filed another report with the police. During this time, I started the process of getting a stalking no contact order. I saw 3 different victim advocates who all told me different things. I went out of town for a conference, and during that time, somebody had attempted to break into my home. I had an ADT security system, so while they didn't succeed, I was aware of the attempts. After the conference, I came home to the entire world shutting down because of COVID. I was trapped in my home 24/7, with my stalker neighbor next door. Luckily, court proceedings for protection orders didn't stop. Right before court, he sent me a text telling me he was sorry for what he'd done, that he could tell when he saw me outside that he made me uncomfortable. Then he went on to tell me that he can tell my hair has gotten longer and I look beautiful. I went to court and provided all the evidence I had. The timeline of everything that had ever happened. The text he'd sent me asking if I wanted a massage. The text I sent him telling him the way he was speaking to me was inappropriate. The text saying that he knew he made me uncomfortable. All of it. I told the judge that I suspected he had attempted to break into my house while I was out of town. The kicker is, he didn't actually deny any of it. In fact, he told the judge that he took full accountability for everything. He said he was in recovery and was trying to turn over a new leaf. He didn't oppose the protection order at all, so in March 2020, I actually received the stalking no contact order. Everything was pretty quiet for a while. I mean, he did do some weird stuff, but that's because he's a weird guy. It wasn't anything that made me fear for my safety. That is, until he got on drugs again. At this time, we found an unspent shotgun casing in my flower bed. It was consistent with the one he had already previously used to send a warning. This occurred a couple months after I started dating my boyfriend, and I suspect it was a warning to him. After this, and for a variety of reasons, my boyfriend moved in with me. He moved in pretty quickly, but everything turned out fine. We are still together and as happy in our relationship as we can be. The year's 2021, I was awoken by yelling. I turned on my security cameras and got footage of him sticking his head out his window and screaming obscenities at my bedroom window for about 7 minutes. It doesn't sound like a long time, but when your stalker is screaming threats and obscenities, 7 minutes is a very long time. He called me a harlot, even threatened to blow up my house. They told me that he never said my name, so they can't prove it was a violation of the protection order. The officer said, and I quote, "There's nothing illegal about yelling in your own house." They even left without speaking to him. All I could do at this point was my best to avoid him. I parked on the street because my driveway is pretty close to his front porch. I got used to living with my curtains drawn. I always made sure my cameras were charged, all 5 of them. Yes, because of him, I spent over $1,000 on cameras. Every inch of my yard is covered. Since then, he's been seen by me and by other neighbors talking to people who aren't there, going outside and screaming nonsense. Things like, "I have Cheerios on my necklace," or "I'll put my penis in your butt." I'm not even joking. This basically brings me to last week. In the morning, I was getting ready for the day when I heard screaming. "Someone is going to die over this sweatshirt," I heard. I turned on the cameras. I got footage of him walking around the alley behind my house screaming. Are you proud? How about I get my shotgun? I'll get everybody all fired up. Call the police again. Once again, they didn't charge him with violation of the protection order. Instead, they gave him an ordinance violation for disturbing the peace. The police told me that it seems like he's off his medication again. And that was that. They left. Last night, I was awakened by hammering outside my window at 1 a.m. He was cutting down his privacy fence, horizontally. I called the police for a noise complaint, and they just told him to stop, and that was that. As I write this, he is outside continuing to horizontally cut down his privacy fence. That means the privacy fence only stands about 3 feet tall now. This was the one thing that made me feel relatively safe about hanging out in my backyard, and now that's gone. All of this to say, I'm just tired. I just want to live in a house where I can be sure that my neighbor won't try to kill me, where I can feel confident that he's not going to try to break in. My boyfriend and I are trying to buy a house to move to, but it's difficult. I'm a PhD student, so I don't make very much money. Renting won't work because I have 4 cats, plus my partner's cat and dog. Although we have a place secured for them if necessary, and finding a place to rent with so many animals is difficult, if not impossible. I refuse to rehome them, so maybe it's partially my fault I'm stuck in this situation. My dad has agreed to co-sign on another mortgage, and I've gotten a second job. Should be able to save up enough money within a few months, but until then, I'm stuck. I just don't know what else to do. I'm tired, I'm angry. So I'd figure I'd write this to vent. If you've made it this far, thanks for listening. There are still so many different instances that I've left out. I'm just so exhausted. Two years ago in the winter, my husband and I bought and moved to a farm in small town Appalachia. We decided to go down to our local Tractor Supply to buy a propane tank. As we were in the checkout line, a man in his late 50s, I assume, walked in and stared at us. He grabbed the random woman's shirt off a shelf, then turned back, stared at us some more, and stood behind us in line. He stood so close I could feel his breath on my neck. I was extremely uncomfortable, but I figured it's a small town, so everyone is just overly nice, so I turned toward him, smiled, nodded, and said, "Good morning," hoping the man would feel as uncomfortable as I did and back up a bit. But he did not. He started talking to us, initially starting with pleasant small talk. The weather is getting quite cold. This line is taking forever, telling us about him picking up his great aunt from the airport in 2 hours, etc. Then quickly going into more intrusive territory. Where are you guys from, and where are you living now? How old are you guys? For context, though I was in my late 20s and my husband only a few years behind me, our baby faces could have easily passed for 20 to 21. When it was our turn to check out, I said, "Have a good day," to the man and went up to the register. As the guy behind the register started to explain their propane pricing, the man started to flip out. I mean, he started yelling at the poor 17-year-old kid working his weekend job, saying, "I can't believe y'all are charging them so much for a propane tank, and they're a young newlywed couple. Why can't you give them a break?" He just kept going on and on, cursing beneath his breath at the guy behind the counter. Then he once again turned to us. "Hey, I have a 100-pound tank. I'm not using it at my house. I'll let you all have it for free if you want. You just need to come with me." My husband thanked him but declined. He said, "Are you sure? My house is only 20 minutes or so from here. I can even give you 2 tanks. Again, my husband declined. He continued, "We have to do it now though because I have to go to the airport and leave town in 2 hours." This was a slip-up we hadn't noticed until we got home later that day. At this point, I said no thank you in a bit more assertive tone. Getting what I assumed was annoyed, he dropped his items and stormed out. As we went outside to go get our tank filled up, the man pulled up into a parking spot next to the fill-up area in his pickup truck. He got out and went back at it. "You should really think about getting a second tank. It'll save you a trip and you would last longer," he continued. "You don't want to, both go, or only one of you can just come and ride with me and the other can meet me at my place." I replied, "No thanks, we're good." Then he said, "Come on, it's a small town. It's safe. I would never hurt such a lovely young couple." At this point, the outdoor employee came out of the propane area and told him to get the heck out of there and stop bothering us. So he got in his truck that didn't even have a license plate and drove off. The other day, while filling our tank up, the guy helping us asked us about that day and if we ever saw the guy again. Apparently, he comes by in the winters when it's quiet and only talks to young couples. Major creep vibes.